Here. So good morning everyone in Nigeria and other part of the country. So we'll be looking at how we can publish systematic review papers in Q1 and Q1 and Q2 journal in Web of Science and Scopus-indexed journal. As we all know that recently, in the field of science, for those of us in social sciences and management, we that idea we take the idea from those in science because it's a very common activities that those in science they often use to improve the quality of what they do as a researcher. But however, in recent time, we can see that there is also a lot of publications coming in from humanities, social sciences, and management. And this requires the fact that we must understand the some of the dynamics that involve publishing this writing quality papers in these areas and how we can get it published. Because one thing is knowing how to write the paper, then another thing is knowing what the reviewer or for the Scopus and Web of Science journal, knowing what they wanted in the papers, and then your ability to be able to navigate it, to work smart, then it is going to give you a leverage when publishing some of these publications. So another reason why we want to look at how we can publish it with ease. Basically, this training we are going to have three stages. One is we first of all look at steps in writing SLR paper. What are the steps that we must follow? Then also we are going to look at what are the issues, or why is it that some of these papers are rejected when you submit it? Why is it that some of these journals they will reject it? For example, sometimes you can have some papers rejected like 10 times, 4 times, and it's very discouraging, even to both students, to postgraduate students and lecturers. It is frustrating from formatting the paper. Some papers you can format them by spending 1 hour, some 2 hours. If it involves papers where you are going to use numbering citation, oh, wow, it can take you up to maybe half a day before you can just finish it. So it's very stressful. When they reject the paper, you think of getting another journal, then formatting the paper. So it's a lot of stress. Then how we can ethical use of AI in our writing activities. So when we say systematic review, what do we really mean? Oftentimes we have heard of review. It's a common thing that we have heard of. But when we say systematic review, it's like we saying we want to carry out a scientific review. A scientific. I remember those days when you are in undergraduate days, when they will give you those lecturers to give us an assignment, they will say go and write, discuss. They can ask us to discuss. Then we just go online, we get some papers, then we copy, rewrite, and put everything together. We submit. Yeah, that is the process of the traditional review, where people will just take papers, they put it together, and they submit it. But in the case of systematic review, as you all know, it is scientific. And when anything is scientific, it must be able, we should be able to replicate it. And the process at which you arrive at that product or that process must be transparent. And that is what makes systematic review different from the traditional review that we often write. Now, when we say being transparent, it means that from the first stage of finding these papers and evaluating the papers, all those processes must be what? Must be clear and must be well documented, so that anyone that intends to embark in similar studies can pick up our write-up or our paper and look at it as, okay, I can check this database to get this information. I can check this database to get this information. I can use this keyword to search on Google Scholar, on Scopus Analyze for me to get my information. So, so that is the difference between the systematic review and the traditional. It is scientific in nature. You must be able to document the reason why you use paper A and the reason why you didn't use paper B. And those two papers, they have the same title. They are discussing your topic of interest, but you have decided that I'm not using paper A, I'm not using paper B. The reason why you are not using those two paper must be documented. The reason why you are using paper A must be documented so that it will follow the scientific strategy of carrying out review. Also, in writing the systematic review, we must note that we must establish why we want to carry out the review. Why do you intend to carry out the review? What is the intention? Why do you, decide to carry out the review? Then, when you carry out the review, how do you carry out the review? Then you also need to now
Hello, sir.
establish.
Please,
Hello.
sir, Doc. Yes, this your slides are not moving and it's not on PowerPoint presentation. It's not on
Oh,
slideshow, please.
oh, it's on it's on slideshow in my hand here. I'm coming. Wait.
Okay, and it's static.
Okay, wait. I'm coming. Is it moving now?
No, not
Oh,
yet.
can you see this? Can you see it? Is still is the first? Is it moving now?
No, still on the caption.
Okay. Okay, don't worry. Let me end it and reshare. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
But can you please maximize the screen so that we see it clearly?
Yes, it's better now.
Yes, it's better. It's clear.
Okay. Can you see the slide now?
Yes, sir, it's good. Thank you.
Okay, it's moving now, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when we are writing our systematic review, we must make sure that we must justify the reason why we are carrying out the review, and then we must also establish what we have done during the review, how the process, and then we must now explain what we discover along the review. You see, oftentimes, most times, some academia they believe that review paper it's not systematic review. That is why sometimes some reviewer there are sometimes I think recently there's a journal that I have to sit down and like I try to explain that fine. My paper was rejected, but I tried to write to the editor to explain that the comment from your reviewer cannot be justified. Because sometimes you see some of these reviewers, they have this kind of mindset about writing review paper. They believe it's very easy, and it's not. But for some of us, I also write empirical paper too. If I have data for me to write an empirical paper, it won't take me time. But when you are writing a systematic review, it takes a lot of time, but it has its own benefits as far as research is concerned because it contributes a lot to knowledge production. Now, what are the differences between these types of review? We have the normal, our literature review, we have systematic review, and then we also have the one called the scoping review. The normal review or literature or the traditional review, most of the time, is always about general discussion. There is no particular no guidelines when you are writing a general review. Then sometimes you can pick paper, even you can pick papers that cannot be verified and include when you are writing those papers. But when it comes to systematic review, you have a research questions that you must answer, just like an empirical studies. That is why if somebody is a reviewer that's reading your work, he will look at your research questions, look at your results, your discussion, and make sure that they tally. If they don't tally, because of that, they can reject the paper. Whilst for scoping review, it's always broad compared to the questions are always broad compared to what the systematic review. And the on the traditional review or the literature review, there's no existing protocol. You don't need to follow any protocol. While for the systematic and the scoping review, there's a laid down protocol that you must follow when you are writing it. Also, when it comes to searching for relevant literature, the normal review, it is not compulsory to search for to comprehensively search for materials. While for systematic and scoping review, you must search for on database to look for material. That is why some reviewer will tell you you must not use Scopus database alone. You must use Scopus. You must use Web of Science and the likes. So just to make sure that you're able to get a lot of studies that will make your paper very robust. Also, when it comes to issue of inclusion and exclusion criteria on the literature review, there's nothing like inclusion and exclusion criteria. While for systematic review, you need to have your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Also, when it comes to writing your normal literature review, there's nothing like data extraction table. While for the systematic and scoping review, there is data extraction table. While for the risk assessment, there is quality appraiser. For the literature review, it is not required. For systematic review, it is compulsory. Then for scoping review, sometimes also it's also required. Now, basically, there are three types of systematic review paper that when you want to write a systematic review, there are three approaches or three
Domain
perspectives
based.
at which you can engage yourself when you are writing systematic review. One of the strategy is domain-based review. The number two is the theory-based systematic review, and the number three is the method-based systematic review. Now, for the domain-based systematic review is the most popular review, the kind of review that people often write is domain based. And the domain based is divided into about four types. We have the structured team based, we have the framework based, we have the bibliometrics, and we have the hybrid. The structure based is when you take a topic and you analyze this topic explicitly, looking at the themes, the directions, and the lies, and you provide descriptive analysis to analyze the findings and analysis of the paper. Why the framework base, it involves a thematic analysis also, but you have to move a step further to make sure that in your review, let's assume you are looking at the impact of fintech, financial inclusion, and economic growth. Fintech, financial inclusion, and economic growth. If that is the topic, the title of your review, after after your normal system semantic analysis and the likes, you need to now come up with a framework that will relate those variables together, that shows the relationship between those variables. Or you can also decide that, okay, how can we develop a sustainable model through which fintech can promote sustainable development via what you have read in literatures and the relationship between variables that you have seen in the in previous studies. So you develop this framework. So you now include it as part of your review. In that case, that kind of review is called framework based, because there's a framework that is attached to that particular what review. It is not just an ordinary review, but a framework was developed within that particular review. Why the bibliometrics, it has to do with the ability to I often call it a trend analysis. You want to look at what is happening within that particular field over time, trend, looking at the themes, the keyword, the citation, the affiliation by country, journal, and the likes. So it's more in-depth when it comes to looking at trend of publications, what is happening in the field, what are the collaborations among researchers, among universities, among scholars, then what are the emerging keywords. So all those things is part of bibliometrics. Why the hybrid is when you merge the structure base, the team base, you merge it together with bibliometrics analysis. Sometimes when you look at some papers, they will be like, let's say 60% um, SLR, then 40% bibliometrics. So that is an example of hybrid hybrid review. Then we also have the theory based review. The theory-based review is when you look at your field of study, and maybe after looking at your field of study, you realize that there are some theory that okay, this theory, how are they using this particular theory? How are they applying it over time? How are they applying that particular theory of, for example, we have resource based in the field of management. We have theories like resource based view. For example, that theory you can look at you can write a systematic review on on how resource based view theory is being used by management studies. So when you do that, then that one becomes a theory based review. And theory based review is one of those scanty review that we often have. Most time people don't write the theory based. That is the reason why the the domain based review, those four classification, is more popular. But the benefit of this one, the theory based review, is that because it is not more popular, when you write it, it often catch the attention of the editor. Then we also have the method based review. The method based review is when you look at your field of study, you look at how are they applying some issues. For example, recently I published a paper in Emerald, August 1. So I was, because in the field of management, there is this terminology. We have risk factor, we have risk attitude. They call it different name, risk assessment and the likes. But now, if you look at some management studies, sometimes some people will use that risk. They will use it as mediator. Some people will use it as moderator. Now, I was not thinking the day I was sitting down and I was thinking, this variable, is it a mediator or a moderator? Because sometimes, even as a researcher, when you carry out some research, you look at this variable, is it okay? And I said, let me write a review. So when I write a review, though the review was like a method based, but along the line, I also introduced a framework in the review to establish relationship between the variable and justify it with results based theory. So apart from the fact that that paper is a method based review, it's also a framework based review. However, oftentimes among the domain based review, the framework based review, most of the time, editors often most of the time they don't reject it, and even if they reject it, you still get a reputable journals to publish framework based review. Because one of the reasons is that, one, apart from the fact that you are trying to analyze what has happened as far as literature is concerned, you have been able to show the relationship between those variable, concrete relationship that exists between the variables. And also, when you read a framework based review, for maybe a researcher, it gives an opportunity to look at, okay, according to this paper, it shows that there's a link between fintech, financial inclusion, and sustainable development goal. Okay, within it, there are some variables. We have some variable in that particular framework, and there's a link between them. Now, as a researcher, you cannot decide, okay, can this be true? Okay, let me investigate some of those, the link, the relationship. Okay, looking at the framework, you can decide that, okay, this should be the mediator, this becomes the moderator, this becomes the dependent variable, this becomes the independent variable, and from there you can test the argument or the assertion advanced by the author in the framework, of which at the end of the day, if it is correct, then you have contributed to knowledge, and if not, you can write a constructive criticism about the work, and then also to contribute your own quota to advancement of knowledge. And then also the framework based review, most often time it provides a direction for future studies, where people can realize that, okay, according to this framework, we can add this variable, we can remove this variable. Okay, this is what's happening as far as previous studies is concerned. And then another benefit one of the reasons why some editors often like to publish it is that it's part of is a kind of papers that often generate a lot of citations. And those journals, what of some of those things that they use to promote themselves, the marketing part of their business, is they often like to publish papers that is going to generate more citations to them, because the more they have more citations, they have more ranking in Scopus database and Web of Science database. Now, what are the significance of systematic review? When you carry out systematic review, as I've said earlier, is going to give us the direction for future research. Then it also give us the opportunity to see multiple gap in our research. For example, if you carry out your data extraction table and then at the end of the day you are going to see gap based on country. Okay, when you look at the numbers of country that are published, the most published country, the less published country, for the less published countries, it becomes a gap for you to look at it that okay, in this country or in the continent of Africa or Asia, there's need for more research in this area. So and also it also assists in, in development of conceptual framework. Also, there are some questions that a normal research, an empirical research may not be able to answer. For example, as I told you that I wrote a paper that I published in Emerald recently, that I was looking at why is it that the variable continue to change in usage over time. So I tried to establish I started to look at literature and establish the fact about it. Also, there was also a paper I submitted yesterday. I was writing on the psychometric properties of psychometric properties of economic literacy measures. So, because oftentimes some people, when they want to measure, there's this term called economic literacy. There's another one called financial literacy. Some people, when they want to measure the economic literacy, most often time they often use financial literacy erroneously, of which financial literacy is a subset of economic literacy. So, and then when it comes to designing um, questionnaire or instrument, some people design the instrument, the economic literacy instrument, without, some people even use financial literacy dimensions. They bring it in and they module everything together. So there was a time I thought of writing a review paper on it. So yesterday I was able to submit the paper to a journal. So that is also one of the benefits. So the issues like this, empirical paper may not be able to answer them, because we want to clarify an issue as regard how people measure a particular construct over time in research. Then what should be the right perception, the right direction for future studies, so that the upcoming studies will not commit the same mistakes that have been committed by the previous studies. Now, what are the steps in carrying out this systematic review? Number one is we develop a smart title. Number two, we develop a focused research questions. We define our inclusion and exclusion criteria. We have to search the literature. Then we select the study we want to use, assess the study's quality, then extract data, analyze and present our result, then interpret result and draw conclusions. Now, in writing our review paper is just the same thing like our empirical paper, as I've told you, because when we say empirical paper, it has even carried the name empirical. It's science is already part of it. But in case of our own the review too, we call it systematic review, is also scientific because it is systematic. So we can just structure using the TIMRAD format. We are having the title, the introduction. Under the introduction, you need to have the questions you want to answer and the problem that you want to investigate, the method, which we are going to get to. Then we have also the result, and then the discussion. Now, after the discussion, you have to include your conclusions and then implications and counterintuitive findings. All these ones comes after the conclusion. But there are some journals that their principle, like Emerald now. Emerald, one of those things you can use to make sure if you want them to accept your paper. After your conclusion, you must have implication for social implication, practical implication, or implication for theory development, implication for managerial studies. If it is not there, though they may consider the paper, but most of the time when you have it, at least already you are trying to buy them in. Aha. So when we are selecting title, another issue, I think personally recent time I now discover that in this journey of publishing, I know as a young researcher, I realized that title means a lot to some of these editor. The reason being that I have some papers. There's a paper I submitted in Emerald that it has been accepted in Emerald. Recently, when I submitted that paper to a Q2 journal, they rejected the paper. I submitted to another paper, Scopus, maybe Q3, they rejected the paper. Okay, I now took that paper to Q4. I submitted. I was even like, this one should accept the paper so that we can publish the paper. They rejected the paper. So I now look at that paper. I just look at the title. I restructure the title. Immediately I restructure the title, I submit it to another Q2 journal, and now they have accepted the paper. And oftentimes I've realized that title matters in submitting papers. Now the issue is this: some of these Scopus and Web of Science papers, some of them they receive up to 10,000 submission. So it is not possible for the editorial team or the reviewer to now start reading your paper before they will first of all reject or accept. That is the first decision. They will tell you, some of them will call it editorial check. So what they do most of the time is to first of all look at the title and the abstract. Sometimes we may have our title may be good, our work may be good, but the way we structured our title could be problematic. Now, if you look at this example now, if you look at we have basically three types of title. We have the descriptive title, the question title, and the compound title. Now, if you look at this title, this descriptive title, the effect of social media on teenage mental health. Now, this same paper, if you submit it to any journal, if using the descriptive title, they may assume that this paper, what's so unique, they will reject it. But oftentimes, studies have shown that if you make use of questioning type of title or compound title, like what we have here, scrolling into trouble, the impact of social media on teenage mental health, or is social media harming teenage mental health. There's a paper I published in March in Emerald. The title of the paper is does institutional pillars harm or support economic growth? Does the institutional pillars harm or support entrepreneurship and economic growth? That is the title of the paper. So most often time we realize that questioning title and compound title, they usually give you a lot of leverage when it comes to publishing your research paper. Then the next thing is for you to develop your research questions. So when you in developing your research question, it's very mandatory that you have a focused research question that will guide what you are writing, because it's the research questions that will determine your inclusion and exclusion criteria. It's going to influence your inclusion and exclusion criteria. It's going to determine how you are going to search on various database. It's going to equally influence the kind of data you are going to extract. We'll get there when we get to data extraction table. I will show you, because when you're extracting your data for each review that you are writing, for different review, there is different kind of data you're going to extract from the paper, depending on the focus of your research questions. And it's also going to influence your analysis and presentation of results. Now, when you are writing any research questions, your research question must be question that is feasible. It must be interesting, novel, then ethical, and it must equally it must be relevant to what you are doing. Ethical, sometimes some people will carry out they will carry out a research, and the research it could be, or the question they raise in that particular paper could be a questions that can tarnish some national image. I could remember there was a day an editor of a journal called me and asked me about because somebody submitted a paper from Nigeria. The paper is on they say they are discussing the role of women. They now title the statement of the former President Buhari on women belong to other room. So it's part of the title. So the editor then submitted the paper to a editor in Malaysia. So the editor now called me and asked me that, because he looked at the title of the paper, he was not saying this paper is a controversial issue and it's a national issue. That I told him right away that you should just reject the paper. Yeah, because ordinarily it doesn't make sense. Aha. Because if you find we may have our in each country have their own issue, but we cannot say that women are not given opportunity to they are not deprived opportunity. Yes, as far as education is concerned in Nigeria. Though it happens in some other part of the world, but not in Nigeria. At least we have people like Okojo Owela and the likes that are performing excellently well. So now, after your research question, the next thing is you have to look at the introduction. Now, in writing your introduction, in that introduction, you must be able to establish your gap. You must be able to establish your gap, the reason why you are writing that paper. And establishing your gap, you have to establish the gap, and also make sure that within your introduction, there is a very strong problem statement when you are writing this gap. And if you are able to articulate a very smart problem when you are writing it, then the editor, the reviewer, they will realize that the paper have a lot of substance. Even some of them, they will even the paper I published in August on, I think even though in that paper in the introduction I've already established a gap, but the reviewer still told me the gap is not enough. I have to go and include more gaps within the introductory part of that paper. So it is very compulsory for us that when we are writing some of these papers, we have to make sure we have the gap. And then in getting gap, if you look at some other previous work, if you look at their introduction, sometimes some papers, if you look at the abstract, the introduction of the abstract, the second line of the abstract, they usually come up with some problem statement or gap. Then also, if you look at the second to the last paragraph of most of these papers, they usually have problem statement and gap, well written and structured. So when you go to most of these papers, you can also come out with problems and gap for your own study that you want to, because the gap or the problem statement in that introduction is the market, is the marketing point, the selling point for your paper. The reason why you have to tell them that, see, this paper I'm writing as an editor, you have to just publish it. You are as a as a author, you are also writing, and especially when you want to publish in journals where you don't have money to pay, you don't have APC. Aha. So it's an issue. You have to make sure all those things are well articulated. Then also in getting those gaps, sometimes it is good to always look at recent literatures, because for example, you want to tell us that a particular issue, there are scanty of study that have discussed the issue of climate issues in Africa, or there are scanty of study that have discussed climate issue in Asia or in US. You are not citing 2014. So if you are citing 2014, the question is, are you telling us that from 2014 to 2014 to 2024, there is no study? So, if you are writing a problem statement or you are establishing your gap in the introductory part, if you are citing recent study like 2024, 2023, 2022, at least 5 years back, it shows that no, this study is is, is worthwhile. And most often time, I realize that sometimes when you read quality papers to write your papers, or it also matters a lot. They are going to open your eyes to a lot of things, issues, and papers like those in Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, sustainability, NDPI, and Scopus database, and Web of Science database too. So they are very quality papers that you can always use. Then also, when you are establishing your gap, you should try to reject any paper that is not online. Any paper that is published that is not online is not always good to use it to write a paper and submit to good journals. You can write and submit to other journals, but when it comes to submitting to Scopus and Web of Science index journals, it is not good enough. Let me give you an example. For like Springer, if you are submitting papers to Springer, they already have their database ready for you. Immediately you submit, the Springer database will take your paper and search online for those paper that your reference. We will search your reference online and will give you the result. Immediately, let's assume you make use of 50 papers. You have 50 references in your paper. And the Springer database, after submitting and says submit, thank you for submission, the Springer database immediately will extract your references and search for it online, and they give you the result. If you have, maybe after 1 or 2 minutes after your submission, if you check back, they will say you, oh yeah, you can check the result of your citation or references. Now, by the time you check, if the editor realize that almost maybe out of 60, maybe 15 or 20 of your paper can be verified, the remaining 40 or the remaining 30 cannot be verified, they will reject the paper. They will reject, most often they can reject the paper, except if they like the issue that you discussed. They cannot tell you that, okay, because this paper they like the quality of the work, they like the work, okay, go and rewrite everything from the beginning to the end using or searching for papers in the following database and others. But most often it can lead to rejection, because immediately they analyze the references and realize that they can only see about maybe 20 out of 60. Then the editor will declare those ones that you cannot see, they will declare it as what? Predated journals. That is their language. They will say you have made use of more predated journals in writing your papers, and which they will deem fit that they need to reject such a paper. So also in writing the problem statement in the introductory part, if you if you check the limitation or future direction of most work, they will also tell you those issues, those areas where future teachers can decide to write on, and then you can also use it to write your problem statement or to establish your gap. Now, the next thing is establishing your eligibility criteria, the inclusion and the exclusion criteria. Now, just like in a empirical review, those in the field of science, for example, if you want to carry out maybe a survey study, you are going to say that all lecturers in South Africa will be part of the studies. For a survey review, all lecturers will be part of the study. You now narrow it down and now pick some sample. So now, by even saying that all lecturers, it means that maybe technicians in the university will be excluded, administrator in the university will be excluded. Maybe in South Africa, I don't know, maybe you have like assistant lecturer or support staff that assist the lecturer to carry out tutorial, they will be excluded also based on that statement that you have made. So the same thing apply to systematic review because our subjects, or what I can say respondent in the case of survey research design, is literature. So because we are using literature, we must also set an inclusion and exclusion criteria for those papers we want to include in that study. So the inclusion criteria will now tell us which paper to include and which paper to exclude. And those facts must be well documented because it's going to be part of your total write-up that you are going to submit when you are submitting the full paper. And most of this time, the inclusion criteria, the research questions will determine a lot about the your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Then also, in setting the inclusion criteria, you can decide as a researcher that okay, I want to look at what is the trend as far as climate change studies. What is the trend in climate change studies? What is the trend in change studies? Now, in analyzing this trend, you can decide that I want to use 10 years back from 2024 downward. So any paper published, maybe any paper published beyond, if you are saying 2024, we means that maybe from 2014 upward. So any paper published from 2013, though they are relevant to, but you are going to put them, if it's part of those papers that you downloaded, you are going to count them as part of the exclusion. What's the reason for exclusion? Years of coverage. Then sometimes also it could be geography. There's some review that is nationalistic in nature. There are some people they write a review. There's a review paper I wrote that the title of the review is we are trying to look at strategy. We try to look at the strategies, the e-commerce strategy that has been used in ASEAN over time. Though the paper has been accepted this last Friday by the Emerald editor. So in that particular review, that review is continental. It's not global. It's continental. So in that case, this means that we only include papers that fall within the continent of Asia, and any other papers that comes from other continents, we are going to exclude them. So that is where geography comes in. Then the study type, you can decide. There are some review that you can decide that okay, I don't want to include some papers, qualitative, quantitative, and the lies. But it's always better to include both the quality, quantity, and the mix. It makes your work to be more robust. But however, book chapters and conference proceeding should be excluded. Fine, but the case of the book chapter, in rare cases, I believe you can justify the reason why you include book chapter. But if you want to include book chapter, it should be book chapters from reputable publishers like Springer, Taylor and Francis, Elsevier, because those one, their book chapter follow due process of journal publishing. No book chapter that has been published by all those reputable journal, publishing house that will not undergo severe and thorough review. They're just like you publishing a journal. So in that case, you can add. But some other book chapter, the quality at which the way at which they produce them is very low. So that is the reason why some people often reject them. But in a situation whereby maybe the type what you are writing on, there is no much paper on it, you can include it, but make sure it's from those reputable publisher. However, conference proceeding, you don't need to include it because most of the time this conference proceeding, after the conference they will just publish, they send it to press and then they print it out, everybody continue share to those that they attended the conference. So in that case, the conference proceeding, I think, is a no-go area. The language of publications. When you are searching for papers to use for systematic review, there are some papers they are written in Malay, some they are written in Arabic, some they are written in Swahili or those South African languages. So paper written in some local language that you cannot read and you cannot understand, it is better you exclude the paper. So in all this, when you are writing your paper or when you are writing your systematic review, you have to establish some of these facts. The next thing is the search strategy. Now, the in searching for papers, you have to be your research question will also guide you in terms of searching for paper. And when you are searching, we must make sure that we search through reputable database, especially when you want to have your papers published in Scopus journals, Scopus Web of Science. You must make sure at least you must use Scopus database or Web of Science database. I've seen the cases where my paper was rejected because the reviewer told me the paper I did not, though I made use of Google Scholar and Scopus, but he said I did not use the Web of Science. So and on that basis, he said the reviewer said they should reject the paper. So, but what I know is at least one of those two databases should be used when you are writing any quality papers, because at the end of the day, papers from those databases will also affect your citation along the line. Because immediately when they cite those work, they are going to see work that often cite them, and that can make your own work to gain more citation. In searching database for some of these papers, the title of your topic, sometimes when you search with a particular keyword, you may not be able to get all the materials you want. So sometimes you have to be smart in searching those words in such a way that you can always provide. Okay, let's assume the topic of your discourse is economic literacy. Now, if you go on Scopus database now or Google and search economic literacy, it can give you 20,000 or 40,000 publication. But by the time you start to search, maybe you will be able to get 300 or 400 on economic literacy. Now, the problem is this: because you have literacy in that economy, that the word economic literacy is going to pick all the keyword that is having literacy, grammatical literacy or whatever they call it. Those in English language, they have their own literacy too. And you have a lot of literacy, civic literacy, numerical literacy, and the likes. So it's going to pick any word that have literacy, any paper that have literacy is going to pick it and bring it. That's the reason why when you are searching for some of these papers, you have to, okay, what I'm searching for is economic literacy. What are the synonyms or related terms? Okay, financial literacy. For example, you are in the area of climate, then you know that maybe you are writing something on climate change. You know that synonyms on climate change sometimes you usually have environmental sustainability, environment, or things like that. So when you are searching, you don't if you search with the normal keyword, you don't get enough papers, you can always change your search strategy to include related term. For example, sometimes you can use "and" to narrow your search. For example, if you let's assume you want to look at impact of economic literacy on SME performance, you can type it like this and search on the Scopus database. And if you want to broaden your search, you can say financial literacy or economic literacy. And then if you want to exclude relevant papers, you can also say economic literacy, not numerical literacy. So this search strategy we have to understand. That is why sometimes some people will tell you, I can't get paper. I've looked for paper, I can't get paper on that particular issue. Or free there's a paper, but maybe the strategy at which you are searching, or we are not using multiple database. That is another issue on its own. So then also, sometimes when we are searching, as I've said earlier, you can try to delimit, you divide those words, the word in your title of your study, you divide them to search. Sometimes, let's assume you have 3 keywords in the title of your work. So sometimes you can get some people that will discuss only 2. Sometimes you can get some people that will discuss the 3. So you can always search by changing some of these things. Then also sometimes it's good to often use university library, or if you can have access to online accredited library like the British Library or university library in various countries where they have already make a subscription with Scopus database of science, or some of them they usually make subscription to Taylor and Francis, Emerald, Sage, and the like. So with that ID, you can go on and search those database and get papers from them and report them as expected. Also, sometimes if you are searching on maybe if you are searching on Google Scholar and you cannot find some paper where they will say it is locked, you can always use number 5 and number 6. You Google sign up, and then when you have it, you type the DOI, you copy the DOI of the paper, you paste it there. Sometimes, most often, it may or it may not, but some at least about 50% assurance you can get some papers out of those places. So these are the recommended database that is when you are writing your review, you can use Web of Science, Scopus, and the very top publishing house. You can always use them, and equally the Google Scholar. Now, in selecting studies, and when we are selecting study that we are going to use in writing our empirical, our systematic review, we have to review the title, we have to review the abstract. Because sometimes some of the papers, when you see the title, this work is in line with my work. But at the end of the day, by the time you read the abstract, you read the title, you may realize that it does not focus on the research question that you intend to answer. So, and then for each paper you are rejecting, okay, I remove this because the language is in Malay. I remove this because the language is in Swahili. I remove this because the language is written in Arabic. So, as you are removing them, you must be taking note. Okay, when my first search, I was able to have 50 papers. Out of the 50 papers, two is written in language that is not in English language. Four of this paper is published in 2013, not 2014 upward. So you have to document some of these process as you write. Now, in writing your systematic review, there's what we call data extraction table. Most often time, this viewers or publisher, if you don't include the data extraction table, some of these papers, they may sometime reject. I think there was a paper that was sent to a journal, a Scopus journal in Canada. So that paper we just purposefully remove the data extraction table. You know, sometimes as a young researcher, you want to try everything. That let me see what they will do. So after they accepted the paper, the reviewer requested that the data extraction table should be included in that particular work, and we did the same, and we include it into the so sometimes what people don't know is that the data extraction table is like is the data extraction table is like it shows the rigor of your work. It shows the rigor of your work, and that is the reason why if you don't put it, some people will look at it and say, maybe this work is not that rigorous. So that's the reason why you can always look at you should always put the data extraction table in your work. You should always put the data extraction table in your work. Then for you to generate the data extraction table, it depends. This is not a rule, it's not a compulsory rule. But however, when you are developing your data extraction table, the author's name and year of publication, just those ones they are certain, is compulsory. You put them, then the country of publication, okay. All others depends on the research question you intend to answer. Like I said, I published a paper on the dynamics of risk factor uh, in business research recently. In that paper, number 10 was included methodology. I also include the sample size, the analysis. Is it the unit of analysis? Is it a individual analysis or organization based? So all these things was included in that paper because I was trying to deep into the methodology, in issues that has to do with methodology. So it depends on what you are writing about that will determine what you are going to. I will show you some samples of some papers, and then so that we can see some of those things. Then in writing the methodology part of it, though I think my first when I was learning how to write systematic review, the first one I wrote, there is no I didn't put the PRISMA flow chart there. That was my first attempt, so I just wrote it. So somebody was now citing that work when I said, "See, don't cite that work," because then I don't know much about it, but I just tried. That was my first attempt. But in writing a very strong review paper, the Prisma flowchart must be there. You have to show it that this is what you have done. So it's going to give because as a for the reviewer, they have a lot of things to do. But if you present the Prisma approach, they can look at, okay, you say you minus this, you exclude this, you include this. Okay, okay, this is the final paper. Okay, why do you remove this? Why do you remove four? You remove five. So you establish it in a very smart way. So and that's why I said when you are adding or including, you have to make sure that each of these papers, as you are including or you are excluding papers, you have to make sure you take note of all this information. This is an example of the PRISMA flowchart. So you have to tell us, okay, in the Google and the Scopus database Web of Science, so number of papers was taken from there. Okay, when you take those papers, how many was excluded? Five was excluded because not in English. Okay, so what do you have then? You have 96. So you keep on. Then here also articles excluded, articles published in 2013 and below, duplicated articles. You also have duplicated article because sometimes even if you are downloading on Google Scholar, it's often happen, and then even on other database too. Or sometimes you can download a paper on Google Scholar and then you also download that same paper on Scopus database. So all these are part of what you are going to exclude. So then also, if you look at the other excluded box, where we have conference proceeding was excluded and articles tied to that out of scope is also being excluded. So finally, you now have the last one, the included one that you include in the paper. Now, this is an example of the data extraction table. So in order the data extraction table, when you pick each paper, you have to summarize each of the paper based on what you have. The author and the year. So the title is not compulsory. The method that is being used in that paper is always good to have it. Then, if let's assume you are writing something on, let's say you are writing papers on maybe green school infrastructure, you can decide that okay, this paper is it written, or the sample of the paper, is it written, or the data that was taken, is it from public or private school? So school type, country, the findings, and the journal. So, but there is not a compulsory rule that the data extraction table must be like this, but it depends on what you are, your research topic, what you intend to, what you intend to, the question you intend to answer. Then also, there's also what we call quality assessment in writing review papers. Now, this quality assessment, you want to look at these papers over time. That okay, I'm writing this paper. What is the I'm writing this paper. What you have to tell us the quality of the paper, because if you are, for example, people writing the normal review, the normal traditional review, they will just include any paper. Some people will even include newspaper, even blog. They will blog, social media, TikTok. They will put anything, put any picture from any source. They, that's how they're going to write it. And they are not going, they won't provide any references, any what the sources of the information. They will not provide it. That is the reason why in review there is need for you to have a quality assessment. It's part of the quality review. Now, in the quality assessment, we have about five. You can see the paper types has been divided into five depending on the paper. So if you have 20 paper, so if the paper is a qualitative paper, you answer these five questions to evaluate the quality of that paper. If the paper is paper two, quantitative randomized control, you do the same thing. If it is number three, you do the same thing. If it is number five, you do the same thing. Now, if you now come to the response, if you come to the response for each of the questions, you have response for it. For example, for qualitative, the first question is the qualitative approach appropriate to answer the research questions of that particular paper? Because we want to know that the paper you use is a quality paper. Then the number two are the qualitative data collected is adequate for the research question of that paper, because we are trying to screen those paper that you use, maybe they are quality papers or not. So let's assume that out of this paper that you use, out of the paper one, let's assume that you have 5 years, that all the question is positive. Yes, yes, yes. If it is 5 years, that is 5/5, meaning 100%. If it is maybe one no, that maybe the data is not adequate. So, but other questions in that other questions here from 1 to 5 is yes, but one is no, then it's become 4/5. 4/5 becomes 80%. Now, If it's that score is between 80 to 100%, that paper you are going to to classify that paper as paper of high quality. So classify it as paper of high quality. For paper, so you go to paper two again, you analyze the same thing. If let's assume it for paper two, it is average, where you have 3 years, two no. So since it is 3 years, you have 3/5. When you divide it, you get your 60%. If you go to paper three, let's assume for paper three, we only have 1 years, it becomes 1/5. If it is 2 years, it becomes 2/5. And when it is 2/5, it means that the range fall between 20 to 40%. In that case, that paper is of low quality. So when you are reporting, you are going to tell us that, however, under the quality assessment, under the methodology, that I've made use of 40 papers. Out of the 40 papers used in this study, about maybe 30 of them can be classified to be high quality papers using the mixed method analysis tools, that these papers are quality papers, while 5 out of it, or 7 out of it, is of average, while 3 is of low quality. So you need to report this. Now, the next thing after you have done that, and then you have also carried out your data extraction table, the next thing is for you to embark on the discussions of the findings. Now, for most of the time, for scoping review, as I said earlier, scoping review also always have broad questions. But you have broad questions at the beginning. When it comes to this, in your discussion, you now carry out the discussion based on theme, so that you can break down the broad question to theme base when you are doing your discussion. But for systematic review, from the beginning, your question is narrow and is focused on what you are doing, and you must not deviate, or you discuss what is not within the text, within the text. So in discussing these papers, oftentimes you have to look at those papers. For example, in some of my data extraction, I often try to look at, to analyze, okay, this paper answer how many research questions? Is this one or two? So if out of 40 papers I have 20 that answer question one, so I know that I will mark those 20 papers to know that these 20 papers will be used to answer question one. Okay, another 10 papers answer question two. So you can look at how you can put the findings together and analyze the result. Also, as part of the discussion, your data extraction table, you can generate statistics out of it. For example, because you have analyzed to us that the paper you use, some of them are from Russia, Turkey, US, Nigeria, South Africa. So you now need to now come and tell us and plot a graph, so that at least you can see it. Because when you are writing papers, you're writing in publishing in some of these top journals, you are trying to enlighten the larger community. So within the larger community, there are some people, they don't like to read, they don't like reading too much fact. So they want something like table, graph, that will appeal to their sense of reasoning. So in that case, you have to also include quantitative into some of these things. I can remember there is one of these emerald paper that I submitted, and when the reviewer came back, they told me that I need to, though I purposefully remove some of those quantitative aspects of it. Reason being that they usually have this benchmark that their total word count is 8,000, and they will tell you that for each statistic that you put, for each graph or each bar chart, is 280 word. So even though if that bar chart only have 10 word, to them it is 280. So sometimes we often reduce it so that we can get a lot of word count. So, but the reviewer have to tell me that I have to go and include it. But in that case, that is a personal issue. So I include it, and the word count becomes around 10,000, and they publish it. So this is some of the statistics. So when you for example, your first column in the data extraction table, you have the authors and the year. So I have the authors and the years. You can now plot it. You can now plot how many papers were published in 1998, 2011, 2013, 2014. You put it in graph, and you analyze some of these paper. So also you can also run it and by looking at the categories of paper. There's a there is a database, so you can analyze those paper based on database also. For example, in this one now, they analyze based on the Scopus database and the ABDC ranking. The ABDC ranking is another database, a very strong database, just like Scopus and Web of Science. Most of the time, it's often used in Australia. I know it's used in Australia and in Europe. So use of statistics. So you can also the methodology that have been used in that particular paper. You can also put it on a graph so that people can see it on a glance. So also then country of publication, you can analyze it. Now, when we say that systematic review gives us the opportunity to see gap, if you look at this kind of graph now, if you look at the country, the analysis by country, you are going to realize that countries like United Kingdom, Nigeria, Romania, Ghana, China, Saudi Arabia, there is very few study on them. Why Indonesia, Indian, Pakistan, at least there's Malaysia too. So, but for countries like Nigeria, Turkey, Uganda, Ethiopia, there is need for more research in that area. So, with this, you have already established a gap for upcoming research, and that is why for me, if I'm writing anything, maybe I'm writing a paper and I want to establish gap in any paper or in any write up, or maybe I'm writing anything that has to do with research. When I'm searching, I first of all I will go online and Google and search systematic review paper on because that systematic review, some of them they make use of 40 papers, some make use of 60 papers, some 50 papers. So as I'm reading that one paper, I'm simultaneously reading 40 papers because it's going to tell me what is the gap in the methodology as far as what kind of methodology has been used in similar study. What's the country of publications. Now all these things will give you the opportunity to quickly see the gap. That is the reason if you are looking for you are writing maybe you are a PhD, you are a postgraduate student, you are writing a paper to establish gap, always look for bibliometrics paper, systematic review paper that are very current. They are going to give you gap without wasting your time. So then in writing review, as I've said earlier, that there is what we call the framework based review. Now the framework based review, it has to do with you developing a conceptual model development. And this model development will be supported by theories and empirical research in that particular field of endeavor. However, sometimes it is possible for you to get an existing model and you adopt, you use the way it is, you just explain and advance some other argument around it. However, it depends on the publishing outlet. Most of the time, like I think like Springer, most of the time, when you take some of those things, if it is adopted, adopted means you copy it, you use it in your work. Though you are going to tell them the source, you are going to reference the source, but they will still be telling some of them will tell you go and get permission from the public from the author of that work. So which sometimes it may not be easy for you. So that is why it is better for you if you cannot develop your own, adapt. So adapting, you bring in some other variable based on what you have read and also improve what they have done in their own work. And the final one is author's computation to develop your new conceptual framework that try to relate those variables within themselves. And finally is the conclusions of the work where you have to now look at the research questions and then you now give a summary about the whole study. Now, at the end of the conclusion, in most of these top journals, there are things that they expect that you should do, even though if it is empirical or non-empirical paper. In the case of systematic review, when you are doing that review, you are going to realize that you are seeing on some new themes, new terminology, new direction, new concept. You'll be seeing new part. Then you also see how this theme over time is relevant to literature. Now, having seen these new ideas, new direction, there is need for you to now use some of these things to come up with, at the end of the conclusion, you now come up with another subsection, implication for managerial practices, or you can say implication for managerial practices, or you can say implications for policy making in the Ministry of, maybe in the Ministry of Finance, in the Ministry of Education, in the Ministry of Environmental Management. Because now you have written a paper. After writing that paper, what is the implication of that paper? to end user. So like Emerald is part of what they don't toy with it. You have to write the implication. What is in that paper you have written? Tell us the implication. How those in the manage in the those in maybe those in the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of any country, or those in the World Bank, how they are going to use your paper to solve societal problem. Then sometimes you can have implications for theory development. Now you are right, you have written a review paper, which is part of those things that is very good. When you write that paper should be able to support theory. How can this your paper support build on how can it support building on existing theory? Then implication for future research. So the future direction for new scholars and for new researchers. Now, what are the issues why some of these papers are often being accepted and sometimes they are often being rejected? As I've said earlier, the title and the abstract. The abstract is always good when you are writing an abstract, and the introductory part of the abstract comes with like a problem statement that will motivate and engage the reader to really read the abstract. Now, even apart from the problem statement in the abstract, it's expected that there are some cogent points that should be in the abstract. Part of it is a very concise methodology, your results, and then it also depends on type of papers, type of journal too. In the case of like Emerald, they will tell you in that abstract you have to have something like originality. Yes, originality must be part of it in your abstract. There's a section because we call that that type of abstract we call it a structured abstract. You divide your abstract into about four phases. The first phase is the background. You write the background. After the background, the findings, originality, method. You structure it in that way. So if you are using that way, for me, that way is easier for you to get it right in writing a very quality abstract. Sometimes I write abstract in that way and now convert it to the style of the publisher, but it makes it to come up with a very strong abstract. Number two is the formatting style and the word count. If you don't follow that formatting style, some they will not even talk to you, they will reject it immediately because except your paper is very unique. That is when, in the case of Emerald, if your paper is unique, they will tell you we have unsubmit your paper. Go and reduce the word count. So and in the word count, we have to there are various interpretation of word count, which people don't understand sometimes. Like I told you earlier, that in Emerald, if you are told 8,000 word, the 8,000 word means that let's assume in that paper, if you have three three figure, let's assume you have three figure and three table. In Emirate, according to their rule, each of those figure and table, they equate each of them to 280 word. So which means 280 times 6. So now let's assume that if you remove, because if you want to submit to them, you have to remove those papers. You have to create a separate folder, a separate document for your figure will be in separate document, your table will be in separate document. Now, if after removing those work out of your manuscript, if the leftover is around 7,000, the leftover of word count after removing table and figure is 7,000, there is no way they will attend to your paper. It is either they reject it or they unsubmit it if they like the paper. So that is there is no going back on that. If you submit to Emerald, they will do that. And some other papers often follow that style. Even for this journal, there's this British journal, forgotten the name. They have this style, they call it practitioner note. After your abstract, you have to now write a practitioner note. That practitioner note, you have to tell them under the practitioner note that this topic that you have, this your paper, what is the existing issue or existing knowledge before you write it? What is the existing knowledge in that area? You write about one paragraph. What is the existing thing? You write. Then you now write what is the new ideas or new innovation that your paper is bringing in as far as that study is concerned. So that practitioner note, you have to make sure you include it in the after the abstract. If you don't include it, they either reject it or they unsubmit it for you to do the needful. Aha. So these are some of the issues that can affect. So the issue of word count is a serious issue when it comes to publishing. You have to follow the journal word count. Aha. Especially for journals that have a lot of subscriber. So sometimes if you don't format it in their normal format, they will just reject because they have thousands of papers to attend to. So also the issue of single and multiple author. Sometimes I've seen the cases where some journals will reject paper on the basis that they believe that they believe that in their own wisdom that they favor multiple author than single author. But the idea is if you have a multiple author, it shows an idea of collaboration, it shows an idea of network. And you see, in real sense of it, if you have a very strong team where you collaborate, where people bring ideas, for example, you are writing on issue of climate, and you see somebody from economics contributing his own part, somebody from physics contributing, somebody from management contributing, somebody from climate study contributing. If they contribute in the sense of contribution, that paper will be a very strong paper. So most of the time, they favor multi-author and multi-country. Paper coming from multi-countries and multi-author, because those things also add value to their brand, to their paper. Also, the content flow. So the content flow in your paper must be one. You know, some people when they write papers, they are talking about political apartheid in a particular paragraph. They move again to political crisis. From political crisis, they move again to political communication, and they keep moving from political apartheid to pressure group, from pressure group to political crisis. You're fine if you are writing on pressure group. Maintain that focus and keep on writing. Your research question should align. Everything should align. But when you are your introduction, you talk about pressure group. You move away from pressure group. You move to political apartheid. From political apartheid, you move to political communication. At the end of the day, as a reviewer, when you are reading, you know you'll be frustrated, and then you'll be tempted that you recommend that they reject the work. So then another thing is the proofreading. The proofreading also is a lot of issues. So when we write, there's need for us to proofread, read, reread, so that we correct both the grammatical and the. Then for those using, fine, we know that AI, in the use of AI, we are going to use AI in recent time. But sometimes some people are not smart enough. When you use AI, make sure you reread, you read and reread. Sometimes when you use AI to write something, or sometimes they will tell the AI can say in your paper, in your work. So now if a reviewer is reading that work and now see in your work, what's the meaning of this? So they will get that it's AI. So but when you generate, or when you ask an AI to assist you to paraphrase, after the paraphrase, read it and make sure he has done a neat job. If not, try to restructure it before you pick it from it. Then the quality of the methodology too. The quality of the methodology must be explicit, so that the editor will be able to see it. When the methodology is explicit, then most of those editors will realize that this guy has done a great job. For example, most often time, in the case of those using structural equation modeling, even despite the fact that something like the common method bias, the pattern we most stu- most studies don't use them. But even despite that, most editor, when you use them, they realize that no, this work is a very serious work, but because the work has been able to capture bias that may affect the analysis of the result, and the study is able to report it. So when they spot it, even in your, because in some when you use it, the better you report it in your abstract. So when the editor see it in your abstract, they know that even without reading the real work, they know that this work is a thorough work. Then addition of new author. Sometimes some people, after they have accepted your work, you want to go and add new author. Some journal accept, they will tell you to write a letter to justify the reason why you want to accept. But some they will not accept. There's a case of a paper that the person submitted the paper to Taylor and Francis. So they now told the person to improve the paper. So the person gave me the paper to improve. So after improving the paper, so my name was added to the paper we submit. Now Taylor and Francis accepted the paper, but they said the person should remove my name. And the person said I can't remove his name because he has added a lot of materials to the work and improve the quality of the work. So at the end of the day, we have to withdraw the work away from Taylor and Francis to take it to other publisher. So it is better if you want to add anybody to your work before you submit, decide and add. If you want to delete, decide and delete. Then journal scope and paper title. So most of the time, journal scope too is always an issue. So that's why it's good before you submit any paper. Though the paper may be a journal of, I told you recently that I submitted a paper to Q4 paper, they reject. The title of the paper is Journal of Economic Development. And I'm writing on how climate change affects economic growth. And the journal is Journal of Economic Development, and they rejected my paper. So I have to go and submit again to another journal. That one is Journal of Economic. That one is Journal of Social Economics. So sometimes a journal may carry a general name, but their focus it's not it may be specific. Then there are some journals like they will say their name could be Asian specific journal of education, African management journal of Kinecon, journals like that that carry a continental name or a nationalistic name. Most of those journal, if you send a paper and those papers are not domiciled or the data of that paper is not collected or the paper is not focused within the continent of that area, they will reject it and tell you that this journal concentrates on research work that is published within the continent of Asia or the continent of Africa. That's why there are some emerald journals I know some emerald journals that are African based. I think some of them, I think maybe the editors are in South Africa, but I don't submit some of my papers there because maybe those works are not maybe those work does not consider anything that has to do with Africa. So in that case, you cannot, if you submit, they will reject. So also quality of papers that we use can also lead to rejection as I've explained earlier, because if the quality are low quality papers that cannot be found online, like Springer database is going to declare those papers as predates, and that can lead to rejection. Then also the issue of plagiarism. If the plagiarism of the paper is greater than 20%, there's possibility that the paper will be rejected. However, some people will even tell you they want a plagiarism of maybe 15% or 10%, but at least 20% is fair. It's fair, with 20%, you can get your work, you can submit your work to any journal. Then the title too, I've said that earlier. Regional and continental journal. As I said earlier, there are those regional and continental journal too, their rate of rejections is always often been high, because sometimes also part of what they do is that they have domicile, like it has become a regional paper, so they have a lot of influence on it. So it makes your rejection, the rejection will be very high, especially when you submit and you don't belong to that particular continent, or that paper is not that relevant to that particular continent. And also sometimes fine, it is most of the time they will reject our paper, but our attitude toward rejection matters too. If they reject a paper in one journal, you quickly format it, you submit to another journal. If they reject in another journal, you submit. That is why for me, I like to publish with those top publishing house, because they have a lot of journals. For example, now if you look at on IT, if you send your paper to Emerald and they reject in one IT paper, there's another IT paper Emerald, you can also submit to it. If they reject it, you can also submit to it. In fact, most of my papers sometimes it's only a few of them I will just get, some few of them they will accept, but some they will reject. I immediately reject, I submit to another paper. But for me to reduce the stress, for example, if you submit to Springer, if they reject, you can get another similar Springer, so you don't need to reformat. You just submit there to make it more easier for you. Then AI and the ethical use. Fine. For me, I don't it is not a good thing when we generate informations from AI, because some of the information could be wrong. Yes. Okay, look at yesterday. I was on Google, then I Google my town, my village, my village in Nigeria. Then I want to know more about Ilara. Now, when I Googled the information, it now brought out the information. So the first part of the Wikipedia, it brought the correct information. The second part, the information is wrong, because it went to go and uh, brought a write-up of a particular community that they call Ilara Mokin, closer to that particular. It's a closer town. The name is close, but they exist in different states. Ondo, the Ilara Mokin is in Ondo. So look at it. So if assuming I don't know, because I serve in Ondo State, I know that there's a Ilara Mokin, and I'm in Lagos, I know that there's a Ilara. So if I don't have the two idea, I would think it's the same information. And that's the reason why you have to be very careful with AI. You can use this sometimes if you don't know the problem in a particular research, you can tell AI to guide you. Then from there you can go and get papers and look at the direction or the style of writing and the lies. You can use them for paraphrase. You can ask them to help you to expand some ideas or to make clarity. But when you keep generating ideas from there, if you are not very careful, you may fall in the trap of putting wrong, especially if you are not very conversant with that particular area of study. So why some people argue that AI will make or will reduce human thinking? No, AI will never reduce human thinking. However, it's going to support human thinking and make you to be a smart person or a smart human being. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you so much, Mr. Nuruddin, for that insightful and valuable lecture. Your expertise and detailed explanations have certainly provided us with a deeper understanding of the topic, and we are truly grateful for your time and knowledge. At this point, we would like to open the floor for questions and answer. Please feel free to ask any question you might have by using the chat feature. We encourage everyone to engage and clarify any areas where you might need further insight. Once again, thank you to our esteemed lecturer. And now let's proceed with the question and answer section.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you
Yes,
are.
yes.
All right. Good afternoon, Dr. Bamiro. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I
Thank
must
you,
say
sir.
kudos, as people have been saying, in the chat uh, box. You did a very wonderful job. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Please, I have just a couple of questions. I will compress it because I know others would like to ask questions also. My first question is, looking at Google Scholar, for example, uh, using it as a database, is it advisable because Google Scholar cross both good and less, quality articles? That's number one. Then number two, as you indicated when you started, you actually strike a very good point that systematic literature review, you know, is common in the area of health sciences, especially. And recently, in fact, I'm on one literature review at the moment, systematic literature review, and I'm using a particular software. It's subscribed to by the university, but I found out it's tailored towards health sciences, whereby at the point of extraction, that is where I got stuck, though I have a way out. So do you have any idea on how, what can be used in terms of software that is detailed, that tilts towards social sciences, management, and even education? I mean, education. And finally, if you have a software that can be used also for mixed method paper analysis. I know there are some softwares, some are paid, some are not paid. If you have an idea about that, you can share. I will really appreciate. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir. Thank you for the questions. Then on the issue of the software, for me, I often use the Scopus database. Now, you use the Scopus database, you can download the Excel, and then from there you can start to analyze the paper. But however, sometimes some people they often use this AI elicit. For example, let's assume they have gotten the paper they wanted. So they will now take that paper, though they have saved those paper. Let's assume you have your 40 or 30 final paper you want to use. They will now take the paper, they will import the paper into the elicit AI. So they import it. From there, there's a dashboard that will ask you what do you want from that paper. Is it summary? Is it findings? Is it this? So whenever you instruct the AI that what I want is the finding or the analysis of the methodology, the paper will analyze all the methodology used in those papers and will bring you a very smart write-up. So some people used to use the elicit to do the to do the to do the analysis. Then, but for the issue of the mixed method, the issue of sometimes I think some people they are now creatively using ChatGPT, ChatGPT 4, the subscribe one. For example, some people run regression, they use other software, they run regression, they also give ChatGPT to run regression for them. So, and it can also be used to run qualitative data. Aha. But what I always advise is anything we want to use it for, we must make sure at least we understanding that thing very well. So if there's any mistake, we can easily spot it out. Because within ChatGPT 4, there's Python is already within that software. Python and other software has been integrated into I don't know maybe it's in ChatGPT 3, but in ChatGPT 4, there is all some of those software that so it can be used for both quality and quantity.
All right. Thank you so much. What about the
Thank you.
area of using Google Scholar?
Yes, yes. On the issue of using Google Scholar, I often use Google Scholar also. You can always use Google Scholar because sometimes even Google Scholar, because of the database is very broad.
It's
Sometimes there are
broad,
even
so
some
it brings
papers.
a lot.
You said
I said it's broad. You have more than necessary, and it may be difficult to extract quality journals even from it. I mean, to differentiate between those who are that are quality and not quality. So that one in itself seems to be a major task because you have thousands of articles to solve through.
most of the time for me, if I'm working on Google Scholar, if I would download any papers, that paper I always center it on papers produced by those quality publisher like Springer, Taylor and Francis. So any paper that I realize that maybe the publisher is somehow or the paper is not quality, I just discard it. Yeah, I just discard them. But most sometimes, but because the database is very wide, they have a lot of both relevant and irrelevant. But papers from quality journals, if you can get some of them there, it can be useful.
All right, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome,
you so
sir.
much.
Yes, sir. Any other
All
question?
right. All right, sir. Okay, we have some questions on the chat box. Um okay, let me go through it again. Okay, the question one: how can we identify a predatory journal? Do you get that?
On the issue of the predatory journals, there are ways by which you can identify the predatory journals. Okay, thank you, Doctor Anewale. There's also, as regard the issue of VSV1 and bibliometric packages in R language. Yeah, you can also use R language on the issue of paper software to analyze qualitative and quantitative. Dr. Anewale contributed by telling us that we can use the R package to analyze VSV1 and then also quantitative data. Thank you, sir. Now, on the issue of predatory journals, if you go to Scopus database, for example, some journals will claim they are Scopus. Okay. Now, if you check their website, they will say they are Scopus. They will write it. Even by the time you see the Scopus, some of them, the Scopus they will put the Scopus in like a maybe 3D, or all these animated picture. The Scopus will be moving. You say they are Scopus journal. They have this. Some, they will tell you they are not a Scopus, but they tell you they will just make a kind of a statement, a very vague statement that if you are not careful, you think they are Scopus. But now what you can do is that if a journal says it's a Scopus, number one, go and Google Simago. Google Simago, copy their name, the name of that journal, and paste it on Simago. If that journal is on Scopus, you will know. If it is not on Scopus, you will know. But there's also an exception to that rule. Because if the paper, let's assume a paper that has been admitted to Scopus this year 2024, that paper will not be on Simago until next year when another ranking is being carried out. That is when Simago will capture that kind of paper. But that kind of paper, so if you go on Simago, you can't find that, you can't confirm, then you can have a step further to now go to the Scopus database. If you go to the Scopus database, if you search for source, you input the title of that journal. If that journal is a Scopus database, it's going to bring it out. Now, when you bring it out, that is the stage one. Stage two, now go back to that journal. Go and look at their issue. Okay, they claim on their website that they have 4 issues. First issue, 20 publications. Second issue, 22 publications. Third issue, okay, write down the numbers. Go back to Scopus. Go and look at their issue that they produce. Because the issue 2 will be on Scopus. Now tally it with what you have. If on Scopus you have 40 papers on Scopus for year 2024, and in year 2024 in their own website you have 400 papers. I have papers like that. There are journals like that. On their website you have 400. Know that they are predatory. That is number one. Number two is that journal, if you eventually go and publish your paper in that particular journal, in the next maybe 2 or 3 years, they will be delisted from Scopus. That reason why some people they will publish some papers today. Next 1 year, that paper will not be on Scopus again because the paper, the heads of the paper, the head, when you look at those statistics that are presented to you now, if I will show you that this paper they will be delisted in no time. Because by the time they were going for maybe further accreditation from Scopus, Scopus will ask them to submit their submission database. By the time they submit, they see them, they publish 400 every year. They bring 40 to Scopus because they know that Scopus will not accept those other paper for certain reasons. One of the reasons is that as a journal, if your journal is on biotechnology, you must not publish paper out of biotechnology. So you see some journal, there's a journal recently that somebody published in that journal. If you go on Scopus, their name is Journal of Textile ABC. But on their database, they are bearing another different name. The number of paper they have on Scopus is different from the number they have on their database. Such paper, even though it's on Scopus, in the next 2 or 3 years, they will be delisted from Scopus. So those are some of the signs of those spaghetti journals. Then also some of them, if you look at them online, they will not be visible online. Another quality is that even though if they are paid, they will not be quality. They won't be quality. There are some journals that are paid journals and they are quality journals. Forget about your money. They will drill you to the end. Aha, they are paid, but they will do their job. So, but some of these predators, they will just immediately you bring them the money, they don't care. They can even publish within 1 week. They publish everything. So those are some of the signs.
All right, okay. Question 2. How can we utilize a gap in a study for a systematic review?
Okay, thank you. How you can utilize a gap in a study for systematic review is that when you are writing the introductory part of it, your introduction you must include the gap and problem statement, and that portion is compulsory for any paper to have. If you are writing empirical, you must establish the problem, just like they will tell us in the elementary knowledge of research that when there is no problem, there is no research. So when you have a gap or you have a problem that you have spot, so that problem in the part of the introduction you have to establish it. So it is on the basis of that problem you now conclude by telling the your audience that it is on this basis of this problem that this research want to investigate A, B, C, and D.
Okay, thank you. Question 3. What is the major difference between systematic review and narrative review?
Okay, I think the narrative review, if I get the question, is that narrative is something as the normal general review that we often right. As I told you, the systematic review is scientific. We stole the idea. Those of us in education and management, we stole the idea from our science brothers. So it's a scientific approach where you have to replicate where all your approaches that you have used must be can be replicated, and you must be transparent, you must be able to report everything A to Z. So but in the normal narrative review, you just keep writing and the lies. So and then most of the time the writing is not well structured and it's not a focused write-up.
Okay, so the last question. What is your view on including MDPI papers as it was banned or will not be used as graduation requirements by Malaysian Ministry of Education as graduation requirements?
Since anything we are doing as a researcher, we must always understand the context of environment. When I was talking about research based on lifetime, I mentioned about ethics. So that ethics implies to anything. If you are in Malaysia and the government says MPDI for certain reasons best known to them, so you have to do away with it. You have to take your journals to your papers to quality. Also in Nigeria too, we have NUC will tell you they have their own list. In South Africa too, I think they call that their own DOAJ or something like that. They have their own checklist. The South Africa academia, they have their own list. So that is how it is in every country or every continent. So you have to understand what they want. So if in Malaysia they told you don't want it, you have to go away from it. Just like, let me give you an instance. In China, if you want to publish in China as a lecturer or as a student and you want to gain the required recognitions and value for your promotion, they don't they are not fans of Scopus. They are fans of Web of Science. Yes. That is China. That is their own level, China level. Their own is Web of Science. It may not be. And if you are talking about Web of Science, we are not talking about EMSI, emerging citation. It's either it is on Web of Science, preferably Q1, Q2. But at least if you still have Q3, Q4, so far it is Web of Science. So a journal may be Q1 on Scopus, and that journal is not on Web of Science. If you go and if you are a lecturer in China and you go and publish in that journal, you're on your own. They will not come with that particular paper. Even that's why the fact that it's a Q1 paper on Scopus. So you must understand the territory where you are, then you tailor your work and everything towards it so that at least you'll be able to use so that your effort will not be in futility. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Bamigo, one more question. Some papers on Springer have APC charges for it to be open access. Should an early researcher like a postgraduate student publish in Springer when it is not open access? The APC is always high for it to be open access.
Okay, I think for some of those Springer and those that are not Springer, we have two publishing routes. You have the closed access and those that are not closed access. Now, sometimes what I know, like in the case of Emerald, I think I've not made any payment to Emerald because most of the time I also always choose the close access. Immediately they accept your paper in the final stage of publishing, they will tell you, are you choosing close or open? Like the paper I published in March, when I click the open means that you can start to download immediately they publish, you can start to download. So the charges for open access is €2,004. While for the second paper I published in March, that one is €2,008. So, but if you choose the closed access, they will publish it. Now it now becomes a principle of you rub my back, I rub your back. So when you choose the closed access, they will tell you to transfer your authorship agreement, to transfer it to them, so that since that paper is in the database, they can sell to library and university to download. And when they sell, they make more money in their own purse. Though they will not give you the money since you have transferred the authorship. Though you are still the author of your paper, they keep citing you, but because of the money issue, you will not get money out of it. So, but there are some journals that they will say they collect APC, some of those top journals too. If they collect APC, you can just move away. You have thousands of journals that they are always hybrid, closed and open. You have on countless numbers of them. Yes, on countless numbers of them that you can publish your work. And they will just tell you there is close option. Even in Emerald, if you go and read the introductory part, they will tell you they don't collect money for publication. Now, when they get to the final stage, they will ask you, do you want open or close? And some of them, even if you choose the close, after they publish the work, maybe within 30 days, they will lock it. Lock means they will sell it. They will sell to library. After that 30 days, they will just open it again. So people cannot download. So, but at least they have made their money. Maybe between that time, they were able to have like 100 download. So if 100 university around the world download that paper and they were selling the paper for 2008, for €2,008. So €2,008 times 100, that is a huge amount. It's even more better for them than for you to pay the 2,000. So just look for better alternative and then publish your paper. But you can always choose the closed access option and publish in all those top journals. The most important thing is make sure that your work is okay. When your work is okay, don't worry, they will publish it for you as a closed access.
Okay, thank you once again, Dr. Bamigo, for your enlightening section and for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today. At this point, I would like to invite Ms. Rodia to provide some final information and deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, Ms. Rodia.
Okay, thank you. To the information section now. So the certificates for this workshop will be sent to everyone's email by the end of the day. And there will be another program that will be organizing next month, Saturday. That will be the first Saturday of next month. That's 5th of October. And the program will be on how to publish letter to the editors in top journals. So, okay, and anyone with challenges can, from this workshop, or maybe if you have a question that you need answer to, you could get guidance from the WhatsApp group created, or you could visit our website, that's the Client Aspire Limited website, to request for any of our service also. So now to the vote of thanks. The workshop has, like, the session has been really eye-opening and very educative. I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Dr. Bamiru, for the job well done. Like, your presentation today has actually sparked a lot of fresh perspective and new ideas. So I would also like to thank our participants also for joining us today. Your active engagement, because I've been reading the charts from the chat bar, and I say, well, this session was well engaged. So for your active engagement and thoughtful question and keen interest, I've made this webinar a success. Also, I would also like to give thanks to the organizing team for their dedication and hard work in putting together this seminar. And we hope today's session has inspired all of you to continue pushing boundaries of knowledge and research. Once again, thank you for your time, your participation, and your contributions. We look forward to connecting with you in next workshop. Have a great day ahead, everyone. Thank you. Sure. Did you hear me?
repeating that.
Yes, the recorded version will be made available to everyone. Kindly endeavor to join the group, the WhatsApp group, as the link has been sent earlier and it is on the flyer in which we all have around. I have just reposted the WhatsApp group link in the chat box. Kindly pick it up. The meeting will be ending in the next 5 minutes. Okay, only free. Okay, please.
So I will sponsor 3 of them to that place. Because we agreed on it and extended the story. So,